They shaved her head in a Philadelphia courthouse, thinking she was nobody. But they didn't know she was the judge about to bring their corrupt system crashing down. In a nation torn by racial injustice and voter suppression, one woman's fight is sparking a revolution that's shaking America to its core. This is a story of rage, redemption, and a courtroom showdown you'll never forget. Hit that like button, drop a comment. Have you ever faced a system that tried to silence you? And stick around. You're not ready for what's coming. But the October air in Philadelphia was sharp, a biting chill that carried the scent of rain and the weight of a city on the brink of upheaval. The sky hung low, heavy with clouds, as if mirroring the tension that had gripped the streets for months. Across town, the Liberty Bell stood as a silent monument to a freedom promised but rarely delivered, its cracked surface a fitting metaphor for the fractured state of justice in America. Judge Amara Thompson, 42, stepped out of her black SUV, her auburn braids pulled back tightly into a neat bun, her tailored gray suit a quiet declaration of authority against the gray morning light. Her leather briefcase, embossed with her initials in gold, swung lightly in her hand as her heels clicked against the stone steps of the Philadelphia Federal Courthouse. Amara never wore her judicial robe outside the courtroom. It was a deliberate choice, a way to walk among the people she served, grounded, human, unguarded. But today, that choice would become her crucible, a test of her resilience in the face of a system that sought to break her. Inside, the courthouse was a hive of tension, the air thick with anticipation and the murmur of voices echoing off the marble walls. A blockbuster civil rights lawsuit against the Philadelphia Police Department was set to begin, accusing officers of brutalizing protesters during the 2024 vote-free marches. Those protests had erupted after allegations of voter suppression in Black and Latino neighborhoods, ballots mysteriously missing, polling stations closed early without notice, and reports of armed intimidation at the polls. The controversy had ignited a firestorm of national outrage, with hashtags like Call Let Us Vote and Democracy Under Fire trending for weeks on X and TikTok. Protests had swept through cities from Philadelphia to Atlanta, with chants of "No vote, no peace" echoing in the streets. Amara was the presiding judge, her reputation for fairness and unyielding resolve drawing a swarm of reporters, activists, and politicians from across the country. She knew the stakes were high. She didn't know they'd become deeply, painfully personal. Amara's mind was sharp as she approached the security checkpoint, her thoughts on the case ahead, the witnesses she'd hear, the evidence she'd weigh, the justice she'd deliver. But the moment she stepped into the checkpoint, the atmosphere shifted, a palpable hostility settling over the space like a fog. Officer Carl Dempsey, a 20-year veteran with a bulldog build and a reputation for keeping order, locked eyes with her. His smirk was a weapon, his gaze stripping her of authority before she could even speak. Dempsey wasn't just a guard. He was a gatekeeper, emboldened by years of unchecked power and a system that rewarded his brand of control. He'd been praised by supervisors for his efficiency with difficult crowds, a coded phrase that meant he targeted Black and brown visitors with impunity. His personnel file, buried deep in the courthouse archives, was a catalog of complaints, 20 in 2 decades, all dismissed with a wink and a nod from those above him. Dempsey stepped in front of the metal detector, arms crossed, his voice low and edged with disdain. "Hold it. You don't just stroll in here." Amara's eyes narrowed, but her voice was calm, measured, a practiced steadiness honed over years of navigating spaces that weren't built for her. "Is there a problem, officer?" Dempsey's smirk widened, his fingers twitching at his belt as if itching for a reason to escalate. "No ID, no entry, and that bag looks suspicious. Step aside." She reached into her jacket pocket, producing her federal judicial badge, the seal catching the fluorescent light like a challenge. "This should clear things up." Dempsey snatched it from her hand, barely glancing at it before tossing it onto his desk with a clatter that echoed in the quiet lobby. "Not good enough. You're getting a full check." Amara's jaw tightened, her pulse quickening, but she kept her composure, her voice firm. "I'm Judge Amara Thompson, courtroom 4B. Return my badge and step aside." Dempsey laughed, a low, ugly sound that reverberated in the space, drawing the attention of a few early arrivals. Clerks, lawyers, a janitor mopping the floor nearby. "Judge? Don't look like one to me, sweetheart." The word was a slap, dripping with contempt, a reminder of every time Amara had been dismissed, diminished, disrespected because of her race, her gender, her very existence. A younger guard, a woman named Rachel, with wide, nervous eyes, stood by the X-ray machine, her hands frozen on the controls. Rachel knew this was wrong, knew Dempsey was crossing a line, but her fear of retaliation kept her silent. She'd seen what happened to those who spoke up, demotions, harassment, or worse. Her silence was a betrayal. One Amara felt like a weight on her chest, but she understood it too. Fear was a powerful silencer. "I'm expected in court," Amara said, her tone unwavering despite the heat rising in her chest, the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. "You're delaying a federal proceeding." Dempsey leaned in, his breath sour with coffee and malice, his voice a growl meant to intimidate. "You're not expected anywhere but where I say move." Before she could respond, his hand clamped onto her arm, his grip bruising as he yanked her toward a side corridor. The hallway was dim, the fluorescent lights flickering, casting long shadows on the linoleum floor. It led to a windowless screening room, a concrete box where power went unchecked, a place where people like Amara were often stripped of dignity under the guise of security. The door slammed shut behind them, the sound like a gavel in reverse, sealing her in with her aggressors. Inside, the air was cold and stale, the walls gray and unyielding, marked with faint scratches from those who'd been here before. Names, dates, pleas for help etched into the concrete. A single metal chair sat in the center, flanked by a table holding a handheld scanner and a pair of electric clippers, their cord coiled like a snake ready to strike. Two more guards entered, their faces blank, but their presence heavy, their silence a tacit approval of what was about to happen. The burly one, with a shaved head and a tattoo peeking out from his sleeve, cracked his knuckles, a habit that betrayed his anticipation. The other, a younger man with a scar across his cheek, avoided Amara's gaze, his discomfort evident, but not enough to make him act. Amara's heart pounded, a drum beat against her ribs, but her voice was steel, unyielding. "This is illegal. You have no grounds to detain me." Dempsey stepped closer, his eyes glinting with a cruelty that felt practiced, routine, as if he'd done this 100 times before. "Suspicious behavior's grounds enough. Sit." She didn't move, her feet planted, her gaze locked on his, refusing to break under his intimidation. "I don't consent to this." His sneer deepened, his voice a growl. "You don't get a say." The burly guard grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back with a sharp jerk that made her wince, the pain shooting up her arm. The scarred guard pressed down on her shoulders, forcing her into the chair, his fingers digging into her collarbone. The metal was ice against her skin, sending a shiver up her spine that she fought to suppress. "You're violating federal law," Amara said, her voice rising, clear as a bell in the suffocating room. "I demand your names and badge numbers." Dempsey ignored her, his focus singular, predatory. He picked up the clippers, the buzz erupting like a swarm of wasps, the sound filling the room with a menacing hum that seemed to vibrate in her bones. "Your hair," Dempsey said, gesturing to her braids with a dismissive flick of his hand as if they were nothing more than a nuisance to be eradicated. "Could be hiding something. Contraband. You know how your kind plays." The words were a venomous jab, each syllable laced with the weight of history, of every stereotype, every assumption, every act of violence against black bodies. Amara's eyes burned, her chest tightening with a rage she could barely contain, but she held his gaze, refusing to let him see her fear. "Your kind?" she repeated, her voice low, lethal, a challenge wrapped in fury. "Say it. Say what you mean." Dempsey's lip curled, his face a mask of contempt, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes, a crack in his armor. "You know exactly what I mean." He nodded to the guards, a silent command. They tightened their grip, the burly one pinning her shoulders, his fingers digging into her collarbone with bruising force, while the scarred one gripped her head, forcing it still, his hands trembling slightly with the weight of his own guilt. The clippers touched her scalp, the vibration cold and cruel, a violation in itself. The first braid fell, a thick auburn coil hitting the floor with a whisper, like a leaf in a storm, then another and another. The sound was deafening, each snip a theft of pride, of heritage, of power. Amara's breath caught, her chest tight, her hands clenched so hard her nails drew blood from her palms. Memories flooded her. Her grandmother braiding her hair on the porch in Georgia, the smell of coconut oil and the warmth of her hands. Her mother teaching her to care for her braids, a ritual of love and resistance. The hours she'd spent in front of the mirror, each braid a testament to her strength, her identity, her history. Now they lay in a pile on the tiled floor, a graveyard of her past, each one a piece of her stolen by a man who saw her as less than human. But she didn't scream, she didn't cry. Her eyes stayed fixed on Dempsey, a silent vow etched in her gaze. "You'll pay for this." The guards laughed, their voices sharp, cutting through the hum of the clippers like knives. "Looks better already," the scarred one muttered, his tone mocking, though his eyes darted away, unable to meet hers. "Should have known her place," Dempsey said, brushing hair from his sleeve as if it were dirt, his voice dripping with satisfaction. When it was over, Amara's scalp was a jagged patchwork, raw and exposed, the air biting at the tender skin with a sting that made her flinch inwardly. Dempsey tossed the clippers onto the table, the buzz dying into a heavy silence that pressed against her ears. "You're free to go. Court's that way." His voice was mockery wrapped in triumph, a dare to see what she'd do next. Amara stood slowly, her legs steady despite the tremor in her hands, her body trembling with a mix of rage and resolve. She retrieved her badge from his desk, her fingers brushing the seal as if reclaiming a piece of herself, the cold metal grounding her in the storm of her emotions. "You'll answer for this," she said, her voice low, a promise carved in stone, each word heavy with the weight of justice yet to come. Dempsey laughed, a hollow, arrogant sound, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a crack in his bravado, as if he sensed the storm he'd just unleashed. "Keep dreaming, sweetheart," he sneered, but his voice wavered, betraying the fear he tried to hide. She walked out, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving the room and its ghosts behind. The hallway stretched endlessly, each step echoing with the weight of what had happened, the sound of her heels a metronome of her determination. Her scalp stung, the cold air searing the raw patches where her braids had been, a constant reminder of the violation she'd endured. Clerks and visitors glanced at her as she passed, their eyes wide with shock, then quickly averted, their whispers trailing like smoke. "Did you see? Who did that to her? She looks like Judge Thompson." No one approached. No one asked if she was okay. They knew better than to cross the invisible line that had been drawn long before today, a line that separated those who belonged from those who had to fight to be seen. Amara didn't falter. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside, a fire roared, hotter than rage, deeper than pain. It was purpose, and in less than an hour, that purpose would set the courthouse ablaze. Because Carl Dempsey hadn't just crossed a woman. He'd crossed Judge Amara Thompson, and she was about to take her bench. The courtroom doors loomed ahead, heavy oak with brass handles, a portal to the battleground she was about to reclaim. Inside, a cacophony of voices signaled a packed gallery, reporters scribbling furiously, activists whispering in tight clusters, attorneys shuffling papers with nervous energy. The civil rights case was a powder keg, and Amara was its spark. She was supposed to enter through the private chambers where her robe hung, her staff ready with briefs and updates. But today, protocol was irrelevant. She pushed the doors open with both hands, the creak silence in the room like a gunshot, the sound reverberating off the high ceilings. Every eye turned to her. The air froze, thick with disbelief, the hum of voices dying instantly. Lawyers dropped their pens, the clatter echoing in the sudden silence. Reporters gasped, hands flying to their mouths, cameras snapping to life with a flurry of clicks. Activists in the back stood, their signs trembling in their hands. "Let us vote. End police brutality. Justice now." Amara walked down the center aisle, her suit still sharp, her briefcase steady, but her scalp a raw testament to the violence she'd endured. The defense table, police officers in tailored suits, their badges gleaming under their lapels, shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another, a silent question. What the hell happened to her? The prosecution attorneys, a mix of seasoned litigators and young idealists, exchanged stunned glances, one whispering, "Is that Judge Thompson?" Amara reached the bench, her chair empty, the black leather gleaming under the courtroom lights like a throne waiting for its queen. She turned to face the room, letting the silence stretch, her presence a challenge, a demand for recognition. Her scalp burned under the weight of their stares, but she stood taller, her shoulders squared, her chin high. Dempsey stood by the side door, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of fear that he couldn't hide. Their eyes met, and he froze, his face draining of color as realization crashed over him like a wave. He hadn't just humiliated a random woman. He'd assaulted a federal judge, the judge presiding over the case that could end careers, including his own. Amara didn't flinch. She reached for her robe, folded neatly on the bench, and slipped it on slowly, deliberately, the fabric settling over her shoulders like armor. The room held its breath, the rustle of her robe the only sound. a quiet declaration of her reclaiming power. She turned to her clerk, a young man named Ethan, his hands trembling as he clutched the docket, his glasses slipping down his nose. Ethan had been with Amara for 2 years, a bright law school grad who idolized her, but was still learning the ropes of a system that often chewed up the inexperienced. "Is the court ready?" she asked, her voice steady as granite, cutting through the tension like a blade. Yes, Your Honor," Ethan stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and horror at her appearance. She nodded, her eyes sweeping the room, taking in every face, every reaction. "Let's begin." She sat, the chair creaking softly under her weight, and surveyed the courtroom with a gaze that could shatter stone. Case 4823C, United States versus Philadelphia Police Department. Charges of excessive force, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice. All parties present? A murmur of, "Yes, Your Honor," answered, but the voices were hushed, uncertain, the weight of the moment pressing down on every soul in the room. The attorneys were on edge, some avoiding her gaze, others staring openly at her scalp, the evidence of violence undeniable. Dempsey shifted by the door, his hands twitching at his belt, his eyes darting to the exit as if he could escape the consequences of his actions. Amara ignored him, for now. "Call the first witness," she said, her voice a command that brooked no dissent. The prosecution stood, a seasoned attorney named Marcus Evans, his gray hair a stark contrast to the fire in his eyes. Marcus had been fighting for civil rights since the 90s, his career a testament to the slow, grueling battle for justice in a system stacked against the marginalized. But before he could speak, a reporter in the back began typing furiously on her phone, streaming the scene to X. The image of Amara, head bare, robe on, sitting unbowed, spread like wildfire. The hashtag number sign, Judge Thompson, trending within minutes, accompanied by captions like, "A black judge was assaulted in her own courthouse," and "This is why we march." Marcus cleared his throat, his voice steady but laced with awe at the woman before him. "We call Tanisha Carter to the stand." Tanisha Carter, a 24-year-old black woman, walked to the witness box, her steps tentative, her arm still in a sling from injuries sustained during the 2024 protests. A scar sliced from her temple to her jaw, a permanent mark of the violence she'd endured, a reminder of the night that had changed her life. Her voice trembled as she swore the oath, her eyes darting to the gallery, where her mother, Loretta, sat, clutching a tissue, her face etched with worry and pride. Tanisha's hands shook as she adjusted the microphone, her nails painted a soft pink, a small act of defiance against the darkness she'd faced. "I was at the Vote Free March," Tanisha began, her voice soft but growing stronger with each word, as if speaking the truth was giving her strength. "I was holding a sign, 'Let us vote.' It was peaceful. We were singing, chanting, trying to get to the polling station they'd shut down in our neighborhood. They said it was maintenance, but we knew the truth. They didn't want us to vote. Then the police came. They dragged me to the ground, kicked me in the ribs, laughed when I begged for help. They said I was resisting. I was just trying to breathe." The gallery was silent, the weight of her words sinking in like stones in still water. Amara's pen moved across her legal pad, her face unreadable. But Tanisha's testimony cut deep, echoing the violation Amara had endured that very morning. Her ribs ached in sympathy, her own breath catching as she remembered the cold metal chair, the buzz of the clippers, the laughter of the guards. A memory flashed, her own arrest at a protest in college, the feel of cuffs biting into her wrists, the officer's sneer as he called her trouble. She pushed the memory down, focusing on Tanisha, on the justice she deserved. When Tanisha finished, Amara leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm, a balm against the pain. "Ms. Carter, this court hears you. Thank you for your courage." Tanisha nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks as she stepped down, her mother rushing to embrace her in the aisle, their sobs a quiet rebellion against the system that had tried to break them. Amara's eyes flicked to Dempsey. He was inching toward the exit, his face a mask of panic, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. His hands fidgeted with his belt, his eyes darting between the marshals and the door as if calculating his chances of escape. She raised a hand, her voice slicing through the room like a blade, stopping him in his tracks. "Officer Dempsey, step forward." The gallery gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air from the room. Dempsey froze, his shoulders stiffening, his boots squeaking against the marble floor as he turned back, his face pale with dread. "Your Honor, Silence!" Amara snapped, her tone ice and fire, a force that pinned him in place, stripping away the last of his bravado. He obeyed, his steps heavy as he crossed the floor, the eyes of the gallery boring into him like 1,000 judgments. "State your full name for the record," Amara said, her voice steady, each word a hammer striking stone. Carl Dempsey," he muttered, his voice cracking, his hands trembling at his sides. "How long have you served in this courthouse?" 20 years, Your Honor." She tapped her pen against the desk once, twice, the sound a metronome of his impending doom, each tap echoing in the silent room. "And in those 20 years, how many people have you detained without cause? How many have you humiliated because of the color of their skin?" The room was a tomb, the silence suffocating, broken only by the faint scratch of reporters' pens and the soft gasps of the gallery. Dempsey's mouth opened, but no words came, his face reddening as he fumbled for a defense, his eyes darting to the defense attorneys as if they could save him. I followed protocol." "Protocol?" Amara's voice rose, sharp as a blade, cutting through his excuse like paper. "Protocol doesn't include assaulting a federal judge in her own courthouse. Protocol doesn't include shaving a woman's hair to degrade her. Protocol doesn't include laughing while you strip someone of their dignity." She leaned forward, her eyes burning into his, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper that carried the weight of centuries of injustice. "You didn't even ask my name. You saw a black woman and decided I was nothing. And that, Officer Dempsey, is why you're done." She turned to the U.S. Marshals stationed by the door, their faces grim but resolute, their hands already reaching for their cuffs. "Take Officer Dempsey into custody. Charges of assault, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice will be filed by end of day." The marshals moved swiftly, cuffs clicking as they secured his wrists, the sound echoing like a death knell in the cavernous room. "No, wait!" Dempsey shouted, his voice cracking with desperation, his body thrashing against the marshal's grip. "I was just doing my job. You can't do this." His boots scraped the floor, his shouts echoing as they dragged him toward the side door, his protests growing fainter with each step. Amara's face was stone, her voice unyielding, a pillar of justice in a storm of chaos. "You betrayed this court. Take him away." As Dempsey was led out, his shouts fading into the hallway, the courtroom hummed, not with cheers, but with a low electric pulse, a collective realization that something monumental had just happened. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their cameras flashing, their live streams flooding X with clips of Dempsey's arrest, the hashtag Yamaris Fight trending alongside a Judge Thompson. Activists in the gallery gripped each other's hands, tears in their eyes, their signs raised higher. Justice for Amara. End systemic racism. The defense attorneys representing the police department looked like they'd been gut-punched, their faces pale, their notes forgotten on the table, their confidence shattered by the morning's events. Amara tapped her gavel once, the sharp crack silencing the room, a sound that reverberated with the weight of her authority. We will recess for 10 minutes. When we return, this court will continue its work. She stood, her robe flowing behind her like a banner, and walked to her chambers, the doors closing with a soft thud. Inside, she sat at her desk, the weight of the morning pressing against her chest, a heaviness that threatened to crush her if she let it. She stared into the mirror across the room, her reflection a stranger, scalp uneven, eyes heavy with the day's burden, but burning with a resolve that felt ancient, unbreakable. She touched the raw patches where her braids had been, her fingers trembling, the sting of the air against her skin, a reminder of the violence she'd endured. But beneath the pain, there was something else. Strength, purpose, a fire that refused to be extinguished. A knock interrupted her thoughts, soft but insistent. Her clerk, Ethan, stepped in, his face pale, his hand still trembling as he adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, the press is losing it out there. They're calling this a historic moment. There's already a crowd forming outside, protesters, supporters, even some counter-protesters, and someone from the DOJ is here to see you." Amara nodded, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Send them in." Agent Carla Reyes, a Latina woman in a Navy suit, entered, her expression grim but respectful, her dark eyes sharp with determination. Carla had been with the DOJ's Office of Civil Rights for a decade, a veteran of investigations into systemic abuse, her own career shaped by the same injustices Amara was fighting. "Judge Thompson, what happened this morning is a federal offense," Carla said, her voice steady, but laced with anger. "We're launching an immediate investigation into courthouse security and prior complaints against Dempsey." Amara's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers tightening around the edge of her desk. "Start with his supervisors and pull every complaint filed against him. You'll find a pattern." Carla handed her a file, the pages thick with documents, each one a testament to years of ignored abuses. "We already have 20 complaints over 2 decades, all dismissed. This memo from 2019 instructs staff to overlook minor infractions by Dempsey because he's effective with difficult demographics." Amara's fingers tightened, crumpling the edge of the page, her anger flaring anew at the euphemism. "Difficult demographics," she repeated, her voice low. "Dangerous. They mean black people, brown people, anyone who doesn't bow to their idea of order." Carla nodded, her own frustration evident in the tightness of her jaw. "We're also looking into judicial oversight. Some of these dismissals were signed by judges, including Robert Callahan." Amara's heart sank, a sharp pang of betrayal slicing through her. Callahan, her mentor, the man who'd championed her rise to the bench, whose chamber she'd sat in as a young lawyer, soaking up his wisdom over cups of bitter coffee. She remembered his laugh, his stories of landmark cases, his advice. "Amara, you're the future of this bench. Just don't rock the boat." Now, those words felt like a warning, a plea to conform, to stay silent. "Keep me updated," she said quietly, her voice heavy with the weight of that betrayal. Carla paused at the door, her hand on the knob. Judge, the video of Dempsey's arrest is everywhere. X, TikTok, CNN. Amara's fight is trending. People are calling you a hero. Amara shook her head, her eyes distant. I'm no hero. I'm a judge who's done with silence. Carla smiled faintly, a spark of admiration in her gaze. That's why they're listening. When Carla left, Amara walked to the window, her gaze settling on the courthouse steps below. The crowd had grown, a sea of faces stretching across the plaza, protesters with signs reading "Justice for Amara" and "End Systemic Racism," reporters with cameras, citizens holding candles in the daylight, their flames flickering in the breeze. A smaller group of counter-protesters stood on the fringes, their signs reading "Blue Lives Matter" and "Respect Authority," their voices clashing with the chants of the majority. Amara, Amara, the 2024 protests had scarred Philadelphia, leaving wounds that had never fully healed, and now Amara's story was reigniting the fight, a spark in a city ready to burn. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Amara's fight trending, clips of her in the courtroom going viral, comments flooding in. This is why we need change. She's a queen. The system is broken. She closed her eyes, the weight of their voices settling on her shoulders, a burden and a blessing all at once. Back in the courtroom, the gallery was packed, standing room only, the air crackling with anticipation, a storm about to break. Amara took her seat, her robe a symbol reborn, her presence commanding the room like a general on a battlefield. She tapped her gavel, the sound a call to order that silenced the murmurs instantly. Court is in session. The prosecution called Jamal Harris, a former police officer who'd resigned after the 2024 protests. Black, mid-30s, with a quiet intensity that filled the room, he took the stand, his hand steady as he swore the oath. Jamal had been a cop for 10 years, a man who joined the force hoping to protect his community, only to watch it betrayed by the very system he'd sworn to serve. I was on duty during the protest, he said, his voice steady but laced with pain. I saw officers target Black and Latino protesters even when they were peaceful. A 16-year-old girl got pepper sprayed for holding a sign. A man my age had his skull cracked for asking why his brother was cuffed. I saw a pregnant woman shoved to the ground, her screams ignored. His voice broke, his hands clenching the edge of the witness stand, his knuckles whitening. I reported it, filed complaints. My sergeant told me to stop stirring trouble. My complaints vanished. They transferred me to desk duty, called me a traitor, so I quit. Amara's pen paused, her eyes meeting his, seeing the toll that betrayal had taken on him, the sleepless nights, the guilt, the anger. Mr. Harris, why are you here now? She asked, her voice gentle but firm, a lifeline in the storm of his memories. He met her gaze, unflinching, his voice steady with resolve. Because of you, Your Honor. You walked in here after what they did and didn't back down. If you can do that, I can tell the truth. The gallery murmured, emotion rippling through the room like a wave, a shared understanding of the courage it took to speak. Amara nodded, her voice soft but resolute. Your truth matters. Next was Tanisha Carter again, her testimony deepening the case, her voice stronger now, bolstered by the support of the gallery. Then came a surprise witness, unlisted until now, Officer Maria Delgado, a Latina cop who'd worked with Dempsey years ago. The gallery buzzed as she took the stand, her uniform crisp but her eyes haunted, her hands trembling as she swore the oath. Maria had been on the force for 15 years, a woman who'd fought her own battles against discrimination, her career a tightrope walk between survival and integrity. "I saw Dempsey target black visitors," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "He'd search them longer, mock them, intimidate them. I reported it in 2017. My complaint was shredded, literally. My captain said, 'Dempsey's one of us. Let it go.' I kept quiet after that. I had kids to feed, a mortgage to pay, but I can't stay silent anymore." The room erupted in gasps, the revelation a bombshell that shook the foundations of the case. Amara's gavel silenced them, her voice cutting through the noise. "Officer Delgado, why speak now?" Delgado looked at Amara, tears welling in her eyes, her voice breaking with the weight of her guilt. "Because you're proof that silence doesn't win, Your Honor, because I owe it to every person Dempsey hurt after I stayed quiet." Amara nodded, her expression softening, a flicker of understanding passing between them. Two women who'd fought their way through a system that never wanted them. "Thank you, Officer Delgado. Your voice matters." The testimony peeled back the system's rot, each witness a blade cutting deeper into the lies that had protected the guilty for too long. A mother, Elena Rodriguez, spoke of her son, jailed without cause during the protests, still awaiting trial in a crowded cell, his health deteriorating from untreated asthma. A journalist, David Kim, described being shoved to the ground for filming brutality, his camera smashed, his footage deleted by officers who laughed as they did it. An elderly veteran, Mr. Clarence Jones, recounted officers mocking his service while beating him, their taunts, "You fought for this country, but you don't belong here," ringing in his ears long after the bruises faded. Amara listened, her face a mask of focus, but their stories wove into her own, a tapestry of pain and resilience that fueled her resolve. Outside, the crowd swelled, their chants, "Amara's law, Amara's law," shaking the windows, their voices a chorus of defiance that seeped into the courtroom. Social media exploded, #JusticeForPhilly, trending alongside clips of Delgado's testimony, comments flooding in, "This is bigger than one case." "We're with you, Judge Thompson." Systemic racism exposed. A young woman in the crowd, live streaming on TikTok, held up a sign, "Amara fights for us," her voice breaking as she spoke to her followers. "This is why we march. This is why we can't stop." Her video racked up 1 million views in an hour, the movement growing with every share, every like, every retweet. During the recess, Amara returned to her chambers, the weight of the day pressing harder, a heaviness that settled in her bones. She opened the DOJ file, scanning the names of judges who'd dismissed Dempsey's complaints, her heart sinking with each signature. Callahan's name appeared on 10 of the 20, each marked insufficient evidence, a betrayal that cut deeper than Dempsey's clippers. She remembered Callahan's chambers, the smell of old books and coffee, his warm smile as he'd mentored her, his pride when she'd been appointed to the bench. "You're the future, Amara," he'd said, his hand on her shoulder. Now those words felt hollow, tainted by the truth of his complicity. A knock broke her thoughts, sharp and urgent. Her brother, Malik, a community organizer who'd marched in 2024, stepped in, his eyes heavy with worry, his dreadlocks pulled back, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his hoodie. Malik had been a constant in Amara's life, her rock through law school, her confidant during her rise to the bench. He'd seen the worst of the system up close, arrested during the 2024 protests for loitering, a charge that kept him in a cell for 48 hours. His case dismissed by Callahan himself. "You're shaking the world out there, sis," he said, pulling her into a hug, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "But you holding up?" She pulled back, her eyes wet, the weight of the day spilling over despite her efforts to hold it in. "Barely," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Callahan's name is all over this. He buried complaints, protected Dempsey, let this happen. I trusted him, Malik." Malik's jaw tightened, his own anger flaring, a mirror to her own. "I'm not surprised. During the protests, I was arrested for nothing. Me, a march leader. Callahan signed the dismissal, but not before I spent 2 nights in a cell listening to guards laugh about teaching us a lesson. He's no saint, Amara. He's part of the machine." Amara's throat tightened, the betrayal, a physical ache in her chest. "I should have seen it," she whispered, her voice heavy with guilt. Malik shook his head, his hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "You couldn't have known, but you're here now, and you're doing what he never could, fighting for what's right." He handed her a folded paper, the edges worn from being passed through many hands. "From the people outside. They're calling it Amara's List. Names of others hurt by Dempsey, by the system. They're ready to speak." She unfolded it. Dozens of names, stories scrawled in margins. Arrested for nothing 2018. Beaten in holding 2022. Complaint ignored 2020. Her resolve hardened, the paper a lifeline, a reminder of why she couldn't stop. "This is bigger than me," she whispered. Malik shook his head, his voice fierce. "It's because of you." The next morning, the courthouse was a fortress of tension, the air thick with the scent of rain and the hum of a growing crowd. The sky was heavy, mirroring the mood, a storm brewing in more ways than one. Amara walked in, her robe on, her head bare and unapologetic, her stride unbroken despite the whispers that followed her. The gallery stood before she reached the bench, a silent salute, their faces a mix of awe and determination. She tapped her gavel, the sound of called arms. "Court is in session." The prosecution called Sarah Nguyen, a former courthouse clerk, Vietnamese-American, her glasses glinting as she swore the oath. Sarah had worked in the courthouse for 8 years, a quiet woman who'd kept her head down, her dreams of law school derailed by the need to support her aging parents. Her hands trembled as she spoke, her voice steady but laced with guilt. "I processed complaints against Dempsey for years," she said, her words careful, deliberate. 20 at least. Judge Callahan told me to mark them resolved, even with evidence, videos, witnesses. He said it was for the courthouse's stability. I was a single mom, new to the job. I was afraid I'd lose everything if I pushed back. The gallery gasped, the revelation a crack in the facade of justice they'd been taught to trust. Amara's pen stopped, her voice sharp with the weight of betrayal. "Stability?" she asked, her tone cutting through the room. Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes, her voice breaking with the weight of her shame. "He said exposing Dempsey would inflame tensions. I should have spoken up. I should have fought. But I was scared for my son, for my parents. I'm here now because of you, Your Honor. You didn't let them silence you." Amara's expression softened, a flicker of understanding passing between them, two women bound by the shared burden of a system that demanded their silence. "You're here now, Ms. Nguyen," Amara said, her voice a lifeline. "That's what counts." Sarah's testimony cracked the courtroom open, a floodgate of truth that could no longer be contained. Reporters tweeted furiously, clips of her words going viral, the hashtag number AMARAS LAW trending alongside number JUSTICEFORPHILLY. Outside, the crowd roared their signs, Amara's Law, no justice, no peace, glowing under streetlights, their chants shaking the windows. A young man in the crowd, a college student named Tyrese, live-streamed on Instagram, his voice raw with emotion. This is our fight. Judge Thompson is showing us what's possible. His video racked up 2 million views in hours. The movement growing with every share, every comment, every voice added to the chorus. But not everyone was on Amara's side. In the shadows of the courthouse, Judge Franklin Hargrove, a senior judge with a reputation for upholding the status quo, watched the proceedings with a scowl. Hargrove, a white man in his late 60s, had been on the bench for 30 years, his career built on maintaining order, not challenging it. He'd mentored Callahan, shared his views on stability, and saw Amara's actions as a threat to the institution he'd spent his life protecting. During the recess, he cornered Marcus Evans in the hallway, his voice low but venomous. "She's turning this court into a circus," Hargrove hissed, his jowls trembling with indignation. "She's a judge, not a martyr. She needs to stop this spectacle before it destroys us all." Marcus, unflinching, met his gaze. "With all due respect, Judge Hargrove, the only thing being destroyed here is the lie that this system is just. Amara's doing what you never had the guts to do." Hargrove's face reddened, but he turned away, his anger simmering, a storm brewing on the horizon. Amara felt the resistance too. A memo slipped under her chamber door during the break, unsigned, but written in Hargrove's unmistakable cursive. "You're playing a dangerous game, Thompson. Think of the institution." She crumpled the note, her resolve hardening. She wasn't here to protect the institution. She was here to rebuild it. A new player entered the fray. Lena Carter, a freelance investigative journalist who'd been following the case for weeks. Lena, a 32-year-old black woman with a knack for uncovering hidden truths, had been digging into the courthouse's history of abuse, her sources ranging from former clerks to whistleblowers in the police department. She approached Amara during the recess, her laptop tucked under her arm, her eyes bright with determination. "Judge Thompson, I've been investigating Dempsey for months," Lena said, her voice urgent. "I have records, emails, memos, even a recorded call between Callahan and the former DA discussing how to handle complaints against Dempsey. They knew what he was doing and covered it up. I'm publishing tonight, but I wanted you to know first." Amara's heart raced, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, each one a nail in the coffin of the system's lies. "Thank you, Ms. Carter," she said, her voice steady but laced with gratitude. "Your work will help us hold them accountable." Lena nodded, her resolve mirroring Amara's. "I'm doing this for my brother," she said, her voice softening. "He was beaten by Dempsey in 2015. Never got justice. I hope you can." Amara placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent promise passing between them. "We will." The final day of the trial was electric, the tension in the air a living thing, crackling with the energy of a movement that could no longer be contained. Thousands filled the courthouse steps, their live streams flooding X, their voices a symphony of defiance. "Amara's Law! Amara's Law!" Inside, Amara took the bench, her presence a force, her head bare and unapologetic, her robe a symbol of a justice reborn. She tapped her gavel, the sound a clarion call. "Before we conclude, I have an announcement." She held up a thick document, its pages heavy with purpose, the result of sleepless nights and countless revisions. "This is the Thompson Accord, a mandate for this courthouse and every federal court in this circuit. It demands mandatory anti-bias training, independent complaint oversight, body cameras for all security personnel, and a zero-tolerance policy for racial discrimination, effective immediately. The gallery erupted, applause shaking the walls, a sound that echoed like thunder, a release of years of pent-up frustration and hope. Amara raised a hand, silencing them, her voice steady but fierce. This isn't about applause, it's about accountability. This system protected predators like Carl Dempsey and shielded those who enabled him. No more. She turned to the defense table where the police officers sat, pale and silent, their confidence shattered by the weight of the evidence against them. This court finds the defendants guilty of excessive force and civil rights violations. Sentencing will follow. The days of hiding behind badges are over. She held up Amara's list, the paper Malek had given her, now a symbol of the voiceless. These are the voices you ignored. They're silent no more. One by one, the gallery stood. Victims, families, activists, holding their own lists, their stories, their truths. The room was a chorus of resilience, a testament to the power of those who refused to be silenced. Amara turned to the side door, her voice a command that brooked no dissent. "Bring in Officer Dempsey." He entered in cuffs, his uniform gone, his face hollow, his eyes darting with the fear of a man who knew he'd lost. She faced him, her voice steady, each word a verdict. "Mr. Dempsey, you're sentenced to 7 years for assault, 6 for civil rights violations, 2 for obstruction, but the real sentence is this. You'll live knowing the woman you tried to break broke your system." She nodded to the marshals, her gaze never leaving his. "Take him away." As Dempsey was led out, the room was silent, the moment sinking in, a turning point etched in history. Weeks later, Amara stood on a White House stage, the Presidential Medal of Freedom around her neck, the weight of the honor grounding her in the whirlwind of the past months. Her family, Malek, her parents, sat in the front row, joined by Tanisha, Jamal, Sarah, Lena, and Ethan. In the crowd was a 15-year-old girl, her head shaved in solidarity, her eyes bright with pride, her small frame a testament to the ripple effect of Amara's fight. Amara stepped to the microphone, her voice clear, resonant, a beacon in a divided nation. "This isn't my victory, it's ours. Every voice that refused silence, every hand that held a sign, this is for you." The girl in the crowd raised a fist, her silhouette against the lights a symbol of hope, an image that went viral, a beacon for a generation ready to fight. Across the country, Carl Dempsey watched from a prison cell, the broadcast flickering on a small TV, his hands clenched in his lap, his face a mask of defeat. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the woman he'd tried to destroy, now honored for rebuilding what he'd broken. The screen faded, but the silence stayed, a truth he couldn't escape. The Thompson Accord spread like wildfire, cities adopting it, Congress debating a national version dubbed Amara's Law. Amara kept working, her courtroom a beacon, her legacy a blueprint for change. Months later, she visited a community center in West Philly, invited to speak to a group of young activists. The room was packed, kids holding signs, "Be like Judge Thompson." A girl in the back, her hair in braids, asked, "How do you keep going when the system hates you?" Amara smiled, her voice fierce, her eyes bright with the fire that had carried her through. "You don't let hate win. You build better." The room erupted in cheers, their voices the future, a promise of a world remade. Amara's fight didn't end with the trial. She mentored young lawyers, spoke at rallies, and worked with Lena to expose more abuses. Their partnership a force for accountability. The system pushed back, lawsuits, smear campaigns, threats, but Amara stood firm, her head bare, her spirit unbroken. Her story became a rallying cry, a testament to the power of one voice, one fight, one woman who refused to kneel. If this moved you, share it. Like this video. Subscribe for stories that challenge, inspire, and speak truth. Because justice doesn't end here. It starts with us now.